What's up, gaggers? In today's video, I'll be going over the recent developments regarding the releasing of the JFK Files and even revisit the 2017 release, as something from it has stood out to me since 2017. But as many of you have probably seen, President Trump signed an executive order that pretty much states to intelligence agencies that they need to release everything regarding the JFK assassination to the public.
Executive order ordering the declassification of files relating to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years, for decades, and everything will be revealed.
A link to the executive order can be found in the description of the video, but I will also be going over some of it here. And as you can see in the executive order, which I have as a PDF here, the executive order is from January 23rd, 2025, and one of the first things it says is, quote, "It is in the national interest to finally release all records related to these assassinations without delay," unquote. The document also goes over a bit of the back history regarding President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992, which practically stated that all the records surrounding the event needed to be released to the public by 2017, unless the release of some or all of the information would cause issues to things like national security, for example. Well, in 2017 and years following, there were releases, but not every single thing was released fully unredacted. But that seems to be changing this year in 2025. From the executive order again, quote, "I, President Trump, have now determined that the continued redaction and withholding of information from records pertaining to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy is not consistent with public interest, and the release of these records is long overdue. So with this, any redacted information will now be public, and any additional records will be coming out. Then this follows. And although no act of Congress directs the release of information pertaining to the assassinations of Senator Robert F. Kennedy and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I have determined that the release of all those records in the federal government's possession pertaining to each of those assassinations is also in the public interest." Obviously, the inclusion of those two assassinations are also publicly relevant, as each one of those in their own right has caused widespread public speculation as to what involvement, if any, the federal government also had in those cases as well. Another thing that's nice about those two cases is that President Trump is releasing them without being forced to. Again, a federal act which passed in 1992 and was signed into law by George H.W. Bush made federal agencies have to release the JFK files in 2017. But realistically, nothing regarding RFK or MLK Jr. needs to be released as well, so getting clarification on those events is a plus. And we can probably expect the release of the rest of the JFK files to be this year, and possibly as early as mid-February or early March. And as for the releasing of the RFK and MLK Jr. files, possibly as early as mid-March to early April. It's to be seen, but this is why I say that. As per the executive order, within 15 days of the date of this order, the Director of National Intelligence and Attorney General shall, in coordination with the Assistant of the President for National Security Affairs and the Counsel to the President, present a plan to the President for the full and complete release of records relating to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Within 45 days of the date of this order, the Director of National Intelligence and Attorney General shall, in coordination with the Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs and Counsel to the President, review records related to the assassinations of Senator Robert F. Kennedy and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and present a plan to the President for the full and complete release of those records. Now, obviously, these are just plans. Nowhere in here does it say that there is a specific date these documents will release, but it is important to note that the beginning of the executive order says that the documents need to be released, quote, "without delay," unquote. What does that mean for the federal government, though? I guess we'll just have to find out in the coming months, I guess. It is important to note, though, that what is revealed when all the documents drop may not be what skeptics are expecting. I won't be getting into the conspiracies of the JFK assassination, as I don't want to draw the ire of YouTube via me potentially spreading misinformation, but we really won't know what the truth will hold until these documents release, and maybe even then, people will still not be content. But keeping that in mind, I also want to throw in something that isn't misinformation that has been released in the JFK Files before. Now look, there are thousands of pages across all files released so far in the JFK Files. I'm interested enough to fact check here and there, but I'll just let the historians and journalists sift through everything to see if there are any interesting bits within the files. What I will say, though, is that in the 2017 release, there were 2 documents that I feel maybe didn't get enough attention at the time. Some articles have been written on them, but I don't know really how much discourse has arisen from them, so I just want to throw them at the end of this video. Now look, the main focus of the JFK Files is the assassination, obviously. But within the multitude of documents that relate to the assassination is what they would call record number 178-1004-10091. Now, this document is pretty much just a large summary of plans that the CIA was entertaining regarding the possibility of assassinating Cuba's leader at the time, Fidel Castro. Now, if you have any understanding of US history, the last sentence I just said probably doesn't even shock you, and truthfully, it didn't shock me, that the CIA was concocting plans to carry out in foreign countries, obviously including Cuba. What was surprising about this, though, was that there were plans surrounding those plans which would sow seeds of doubt regarding Castro and Cuba by committing acts of terror within the United States. Now, this is actually listed in a document with the record number 178-1003-10318 of the JFK Files. I won't link directly to the files, but the link to the National Archives where all these JFK files are uploaded is down below, so you can do your own research and take a look if you really want. But yes, that's right. A file that the federal government released as part of the JFK Files detailed plans that the CIA had theory crafted, which involved bombings in Miami. Now, it is very important to note here that the plans weren't to kill many or any people or cause serious damage. But as there were a lot of random plans crafted by officials in the federal government, it's hard to really know how far things could have went beyond the initial planning stage. So here in this last document that I mentioned, the beginning of it states, as set forth in detail elsewhere, which is the first document I mentioned regarding Fidel Castro and the assassination plots against him, the Central Intelligence Agency was involved in assassination plots against Fidel Castro beginning as early as late 1959 or 1960. These plans arose at approximately the same time as preparations were underway for the Bay of Pigs. The plans involved a number of bizarre schemes, and among the means considered in these bizarre schemes was the use of Cuban exile groups. One of the bizarre schemes is actually listed here in this same document, where someone within the federal government said, quote, "We could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area, in other Florida cities, and even in Washington. We could sink a boatload of Cubans en route to Florida, real or simulated. We could foster attempts on lives of Cuban refugees in the United States, even to the extent of wounding in instances to be widely publicized. Exploding a few plastic bombs in carefully chosen spots, the arrest of a Cuban agent, and the release of prepared documents substantiating Cuban involvement also would be helpful in projecting the idea of an irresponsible government." Now look, there are plenty of tidbits of information spread throughout the JFK Files, even at the time of filming and posting this. What one person may find interesting or important may mean nothing to another person or most other people. Whether or not Oswald was involved with government officials to assassinate JFK has yet to be seen. But regardless, at least in some cases in the JFK Files already, we have seen the mask slip from the federal government, and I guess more so the CIA. the CIA was entertaining ideas on how to assassinate Fidel Castro around the time of the Bay of Pigs planning. Among these assassination discussions were additional plots to maybe push the needle to increase sentiment of how bad Fidel Castro was, which one plan was to possibly detonate explosives in U.S. cities, primarily in Florida, to meet their desired end goal. Once again, anyone familiar with U.S. history probably remembers learning about the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis. But it's not too often I hear mention of the Fed concocting their own terror schemes around that time. The reason I find these two documents important, even though they don't particularly give any information regarding the assassination of JFK, is that they go to show that the Fed has even considered doing wild things on U.S. soil. And of course, these plans were made in the 1960s and just makes you wonder, what other wild schemes have they developed since? And even a step further, how many of them have they acted upon? Often, when the average person hears a conspiracy theory, they are quick to disregard them as being too crazy to be true or too evil to be real. But now, well, I guess in 2017, we found out about a possible false flag operation to undermine Cuba by committing acts of terror in the state of Florida. It just makes you wonder what else the CIA and other federal agencies are up to. Luckily, the plan to detonate plastic bombs in cities in Florida and possibly Washington, D.C. didn't end up happening. But if they had been expanded upon beyond the initial planning stage, how much devastation and horror would the final result of the plan have caused? And really, who's to say? Anyways, that concludes this 2025 update video on the JFK Files, as well as my rant on one very hyper-specific part of all the released JFK Files. There are plenty of YouTubers and historians and journalists who deep dive through everything. You can probably find them by just doing a simple search. I personally don't consume that content, so I'm not going to, endorse anyone here. But I'm sure if you're very interested, you can go through yourself, even if you wanted. But you could also find maybe other content creators that go through it. If you like the video, please like, comment, and subscribe! The goal is to hit 500 subscribers by the end of 2025. So please, help me out, gaggers. Help me get 500 subs. At the time of recording, I think I have 312 subscribers. It might have went up or maybe down. Hopefully not down. We're on our way up, gaggers! Anyways, I just want to say, I make random content. I make commentary videos, sort of like this one, that maybe pertain to drama. This one specifically is, I guess, around conspiracies and politics. I also make gaming videos too. I'm a variety channel, I guess you could say. And yeah, see ya!